This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Contraption. Okay. Rashus the Yeshiva Shlita. Baruch Hashem, I've been in the Yeshiva already many times, at least more than 3 times already. And I'm glad to see the Yeshiva is growing. So, Baruch Hashem. Shalom Aleichem, how are you? And Shalom to all the Chaverim and all the Rabbeim. So, I'm part of the furniture already. And it's a great zechus to be here. And the Yeshiva should have continued siyata d'shmaya. First, the fact that you're in this building, Hashem was like, you know, it's an interesting thing. When Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was in the cave, so he needs something to eat. So the carob tree, right? So people think, oh, he's in the cave, and he's, oh, I need something to eat. All of a sudden, poof, the carob tree. Well, you think it just poofed out of the air? The pshat is, there was a carob tree there, but it's a ness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should put Reb Shimon in a cave, because carob trees don't usually grow in a cave. So the thing is, you think, oh, the mansion didn't come down min hashamayim. It did. They're not random mansions lying around Lakewood for yeshivas to move into. It's the same type of nest as the carob tree of the Rashbi. The fact that Hashem was mazmin, one day they wrote a book that Rabbi Berger's yeshiva was looking for a Machon, and Hashem was mazmin min hashamayim, a mansion in the middle of Lakewood, that the yeshiva should have a Machon. So I hope some of these nisim will rub off a little bit on me. And we're now holding about 10 days before Kabbalas HaTorah. So I want to speak about a few inyanim that are nogeah inyana d'yoma. Sefer HaChinuch writes that the purpose of the mitzvah of Tiferes ha'omer is to engender a longing and a yearning for the Torah. You can't just show up on Shavuos and say, oh, it's Yom Tov Kabbalas HaTorah, let me open up my Gemara and learn. You have to want learning. You have to desire it. You have to yearn for it. That's the purpose of Tiferes ha'omer. So the obvious question is, if you have to yearn for it, if you have to want it, so why in the world do we start counting Tiferes ha'omer the day after we left Mitzrayim? The whole purpose is, now that we left Mitzrayim, now we're yearning for the Torah. So we should start counting on the first day. Why count? Why start the second day? So I saw Rav David Kohen, Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron, in his new Sefer, Lekach David, he brings Targum Yonasan ben Uziel and Shir HaShirim. On the pasuk, Mashcheni acharecha narutza. Mashcheni, Klal Yisrael says to Hashem, Mashcheni, pull me and I'll run after you. When did Klal Yisrael say to Ribbon Shalom, pull me and I'll run after you? Says Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, when the Ananei HaKavod came down and we saw the Shechina, we were so taken by the Shechina, we said, Ribbon Shalom, you're with us so closely that the Shechina is with us. Mashcheni, draw us. We'll follow you to Sinai and we'll be nismach but the chaf beizos HaTorah. So that means what engendered the yearning of Klal Yisrael was the Ananei HaKavod. When did Ananei HaKavod come? On day 1, we went from Ramses to Sukkot. How did we get there? Va'esa eschem al kanfei nisharim. We flew. We didn't have Ananei HaKavod. But on day 2, we went from Sukkot. That's when the Ananei HaKavod came. That's when Klal Yisrael said, Moshcheni acharecha narutza. That's when we said, we'll run after you, Ribbon Shalom. Meaning the whole yearning, the whole kisufin, the desire for Sinai, the desire for the Torah came on the second day. Says Rav David Kohen, now we understand why Tiferes ha'omer begins on day 2. Because the whole purpose of Sfira is to recollect, to relive the yearning of Klal Yisrael for the Torah, which began on day 2. But Torah you have to want. Chavetz Chaim says, Lama nimshal Torah l'mayim. Torah is compared to water. What's the halacha? Once a gadol we saw got up and he was speaking, and he had a frog in his throat, and he took a bottle of water, and he poured the cup, and he drank it. He didn't make a bracha. What's going on? He's not thirsty. If you're not thirsty, you have something stuck in your throat and you drink, you don't make a bracha. You take a Tylenol with water, you don't make a bracha. Somebody's on a diet, they get a reminder to drink water every 45 minutes. You don't make a bracha. Not thirsty. You're doing it so you shouldn't be hungry. Rav Shmuel Felder in his Kuntras, he writes, let's say the day before a tainus, people drink, not because they're thirsty, they're mamish not thirsty, they're just filling themselves up. They drink so they shouldn't be thirsty tomorrow. He says you don't make a bracha. Rabbi Shmuel Kamenetsky, I believe, disagrees. But Hashoysa mayim letzima'in mevarch shahakal. Torah, you can't learn Torah. Torah has to be learned because you want it, you yearn for it. It's like mayim, it's not like orange juice. Orange juice, whether you're thirsty or not, you make a bracha. Torah is not like orange juice. Torah is like water. You have to want it, you have to yearn for it. Somebody came to Rabbi Chaim Knievsky, Zechatzak the bracha, he says, Rabbi, please give me a bracha that I should be a Talmud Chacham. So Rabbi Chaim said, I can't give you a bracha that you should be a Talmud Chacham. It's up to you. HaKol b'dei Shamayim. Well, what did I say? You should be a Talmud Chacham. Hashem can't make you a Talmud. I can make you a Talmud Chacham. You need to want it. So the Bacher said, give me a bracha, I should want to become a Talmud Chacham. So Rabbi Chaim said, I can't give you a bracha you should want. You have to want to be a Talmud Chacham. Hashem can't make you want to be a Talmud Chacham. Hashem's not going to tamper with your bechira. So the Bacher was very smart. He said, Rabbi, give me a bracha. I should want to be a Talmud Chacham. And Rabbi Chaim said, that I can give you a bracha for. But Torah, you have to want it. I want to speak about two inyanim of Torah. One which is known, I just want to emphasize, and one I think is kemat unknown. The one that's pashut is, there's a minhag that we have dairy on Shavuos. It's brought in the Ramah. Why do we have dairy on Shavuos? There are many, many ta'amim. What's the first reason brought in the Rishonim, meaning the earliest reason brought in any of the Rishonim, is brought in the Kolbai. Who wrote the Kolbai? Anybody know? Nobody knows. The answer is nobody knows. We don't know who wrote the Kolbai. But the Kolbai is a Rishon, and Beis Yosef sometimes quotes. The Kolbai says the reason for dairy on Shavuos is Torah is so sweet, it's so delicious, it's devash, v'chalav tachas l'shoinech. Torah is so sweet. I once heard from Rav Miller, Zechatzak Levracha. There are two types of tastes. There's a honey taste, there's a milk taste, and the combination of the two produces the most delectable taste. Torah is a combination of milk and honey. In fact, Sam Sofer writes that the Torah is so through and through deliciousness, milk and honey. You take the first letter of the Torah is a Beis, the last letter is a Lamed. The two middle letters of the Torah, Daroish, Shin, Darash, Dalet. And then the Gemara in Kedushin says the Gachain, the Vav, and the Ches. So you take the two end letters, the two middle letters, Shin and Daled, Vav and Ches, Devash v'chalav, says the Chassam Sofer. Devash v'chalav tachas l'shoinech. Some Sofer writes elsewhere, Devash, Dea, Bina, Seichal. The Torah, so you know the famous Avnei Nezer. Avnei Nezer asks a stira and halacha if somebody makes a neder that they're not going to get hana from a person's lulav and esrog. I make a neder, somebody says they make a neder, they're not going to get hana from this lulav, so the halacha is, you're allowed to shake the lulav and esrog on sukkos. Why? Mitzvah slav lehenois nitnu. But if somebody makes a neder that they're not going to learn from that sefer, they're not allowed to learn from the sefer. Why? The mitzvah slav lehenois nitnu. Says the Avnei Nezer, no. Regular mitzvah slav lehenois nitnu. The tachlis of Torah, the objective of Torah, the tsuras ha-mitzvah of Torah, the fabric of the mitzvah of Torah is to be nene from your learning. So let's say I learn, and I don't really, it's not that geshmak, it's not the pshat, I did the mitzvah, but I'm lacking in a madrei. In other words, let's say I learned, but I didn't learn with devekos, So then I learned, I was Mekayim Talmud Torah, I just didn't do it with the Vekas. Or let's say I learned, I didn't do it be'ahava, I was Mekayim the mitzvah fully, I didn't do it with the magic of ahava. But let's say I learned, but it was without enjoyment, so it's felt in the whole suras hakiyam of the mitzvah. Because the definition of Torah, the definition is to enjoy the limud. If you don't enjoy the limud, then you didn't do the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to be nene. The mitzvah is to enjoy it. That's how it's nivla b'damav. That's how it gets absorbed into your system. The Levush, explaining the Gemara Nadar, Gemara Bamatzia, that why was Eretz Yisrael destroyed? Midnei ma of the Eretz, midnei shalei barucha b'Torah tchila. So Levush asks one simple question. The Gemara wants to know Mibnei Ma of the Haaretz, and the Gemara says because they didn't make Birchas HaTorah. And nobody knew, not the Chachamim, not the Nevi'im, not the Malachi Ashares. Why didn't anybody know? Saying, the Yeshiva is standing there, he sees people come in, they open up the Siddur, they say, Anatios Yadayim, Asher Yatzar, Elekai Neshama, they skip Tashanas Nasachvina, and they don't say Birchas HaTorah. What's the big rocket science over here? Why didn't anybody know? They didn't say Birchas HaTorah. It's such a secret. They did it. By Birchas HaTorah. Well, why didn't anybody know? They didn't make Birchas HaTorah. Furthermore, the Levush asks, what do you mean Mibnei Ma of the Haaretz? We know Mibnei Ma of the Haaretz. Avodah Zara, Gilei Araya, Shvichas Damim. So Levush says, no. We know why Eretz Yisrael was destroyed. We know why the Beis Midrash was destroyed. But the Gemara has a different kasha. Mipnei ma of the haaretz. Where are the Talmidei Chachamim? Where are they? Where'd they go? How is it possible that Eretz Yisrael had thousands of people learning in yeshivas and no Talmidei Chachamim? Where's the next generation? They didn't make Birchas HaTorah? Of course they made Birchas HaTorah. Says the Levush and something Oyam and Question. What was for supper tonight? It looks like they had. Was that lunch? It was lunch. What was for lunch? Pizza. You made a bracha?
Yeah.
What bracha did you make? It's a shaila. Either mezainos or amaitzi. Okay? What kind of bracha was that? Bracha sanenem. And when you put on tefillin this morning, you made a bracha. What kind of bracha? Bracha mitzvah. So there are two kinds of brachas. Bracha sanenem, bracha mitzvah. When you make a bracha before learning, what kind of bracha is that? So it's a bracha mitzvah. It's a bracha mitzvah. I'm about to make a mitzvah. Before I put on a tzitzis, I make a bracha. Before I put on tefillin, I make a bracha. Before I take a lulav and esrog, I make a bracha. Before I build a shirt, make a bracha. So before I learn, I make a bracha mitzvahs. No! That's why there are no Talmidei Chachamim. Because if you learn because it's a mitzvah, then you learn, okay, shake the lulav. And it's not nivla b'damav, and it doesn't become part of you. It doesn't change you, and it's not flowing through your veins. It's not coursing through your arteries. So it's like something you do. Says the Levush Avada they made Birchas HaTorah, but they made Birchas HaTorah as a Birchas HaMitzvah. Make it as a Birchas HaMitzvah. If you think Talmud Torah is just a mitzvah, then the name that's of the Haaretz. It doesn't go to the next generation. Because if you're learning, if you tell your kid, learn. Why should I learn? You have to put on tefillin, don't you? So put on tefillin. And you have to blow shofar, don't you? And now, open up the Gemara and learn it. Why? For what? What do I need to do that for? Because Hashem said. That's not the mitzvah. There's no mitzvah of learning because Hashem said. And then there are no Talmidei Chachamim. But if you make a bracha on Torah like a pita chip or a Snapple iced tea, because you're about to engage in something which is hana mamish. In fact, the Levush says there are two Birchas HaTorah. One on a bracha achroina on yesterday's learning, like the same way you made a bracha achroina after lunch. and I want a bracha rishayna on today's learning. Say, why would I make a bracha achroina after the next morning? I mean, I can't make brachas hamazon 24 hours later. Says Lavush Avadi, you can. If you always have to eat, and there's no hefsek from the chiyuv, so then you're allowed to make a bracha achroina as late as you can. So since you always have to learn until you go to sleep, so there's technically no hefsek from the hischayvus of limud, so you can't make a bracha HaTorah. When are you going to make a bracha HaTorah? The bracha achroina, right before you fall asleep? You can't, you're still mischayev. And once you're sleeping, you're sleeping. So the first thing you do when you get up is you make a bracha achroina on yesterday's learning, because now's the first opportunity you have to make a bracha achroina, because the entire time, chiyav munach alei lehizbare l'omaid, and then you make a bracha rishayna. So it would seem that it would be very clear why Hakol Moedim the Ba'atzaras Ba'ina Nami Lachem. Of course you have to enjoy physically on Shavuos. It's pashut you have to enjoy physically on Shavuos. Because if you're going to celebrate Shavuos, you're going to daven and you're going to learn, then it's like saying, Rebbe Hashem, you gave me a mitzvah. No, you must celebrate physically. You have to articulate, you have to feel the idea that learning Torah is hana mamish. It's hana. It's geschmack. It's sweet. It's nitnu lehanois. It's nitnu lehanois. In other words, if we were to say, what is the mitzvah of Talmud Torah? What is it? Hashem gave us a mitzvah to enjoy the Dvar Hashem. V'nismach b'divrei Talmud Torah secha. That's the mitzvah. It's not a hiddur in the mitzvah. It's not a madrega of the mitzvah. It's the essence of the mitzvah. And I think this goes with the next idea, which I think is not so well known. It says, Gemara M'sachim daf samach ches amavez. Rav Yosef b'yoyim da'atzarta amar ivdi li iglatosa. Rav Yosef said, let's have a juicy piece of steak on Shavuos. Amar Ilai hayoyma kama yosi ika b'shuka. Not for today. You know the expression, I'd be an average Joe. What would I be without the day of Kabbalah HaTorah? Says Rashi, Yulav hayoyma shalomadati Torah. Listen to one word of Rashi. V'nisroi mamti. You hear that word? V'nisroi mamti. What does that mean? The Gemara continues. Rab Sheshes called Tlas and Yomin Mahader Le Tamude V'Tali V'Koy Be'Iverdadash. Every 30 days Rab Sheshes learned Kol HaTorah Kula. Rab Chaim did it every year. Rab Sheshes was Namoira, so he did it every 30 days. He would go up to the top of the ship. V'Amar, listen to the words. Chadoi nafshoi, chadoi nafshoi. Rejoice, my soul. Rejoice, my soul. He's talking to his nefesh. He's saying to his nefesh, rejoice my soul, listen to this, L'cha karoi, I learned chumash for you, neshama. L'cha tanoi, I learned Mishnah for you, neshama. So Rav Sheshes is talking to himself, he said, soul, you know why I learned? I learned for you. I'm doing it for you. I'm not doing it for anybody else. So in fact, the Gemara, what do you mean? You learn for yourself. But we know that learning Torah keeps the whole world going. You don't learn for yourself. You learn to hold up the whole world. Answers the Gemara. You ready for this? Me'ikara. What does the word me'ikara mean? No? Originally. At first. Yeah. Me'ikara in the beginning. Kiyavid inish. When a person learns. Adaita denafshay ka'aver. He should do it for himself. So Rav Sheshes said, rejoice, I'm learning Chumash for you, I'm learning Mishnah for you. But you're supposed to learn for the whole world. At first, you have to learn for yourself. What do you mean? What, Rav Sheshes is a beginner here? Rav Sheshes is in Shir Aleph. He just started learning. The Gemara just said he would review his learning every 30 days. And he would always say, Chadoi nafshoi, lecha karoi, lecha tanoi. What Rav Sheshis is always holding in the beginning? It's a Pella. You ever see this Gemara? Everyone knows this Gemara. What in the world does Gemara mean? Me'ikara ki avid inish adayt. Are you ready for this gra? This gain is oyoim v'noira. Until today, everybody thought, and everybody you ever knew thought, there are two kinds of mitzvahs. It's bein adam la'makam and bein adam l'chaveroi. So you have ritzicha, that's bein adam l'chaveroi. And you have gemilas chasadim, which is bein adam l'chaveroi. So you have an aver bein adam l'chaveroi, you have a mitzvah bein adam l'chaveroi. Then you have avodah zarah, bein adam la'makam. And you have tefillah bein adam la'makam. Comes the Goin in Adaras Elio, and the Goin says there are three kinds of mitzvahs. Is that bein adam la'makam, bein adam l'chaveroi, and bein adam la'atzmai. Gilui arayos is bein adam la'atzmai. You destroy yourself. No yefisha chasar leiv mashches nafshoy hu yasena, says Shlomo HaMelech. Mashches nafshoy. Immoral behavior, it destroys the person themselves. Torah is bein adam la'atzmai, says the guy. You're not learning because, yes, it brings you closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that's not the tzuras hamitzvah. It's bein adam la'atzmai. Huh? What does that mean? What does it mean, bein adam la'atzmai? Rabbi Yossi said, "If ilav hayoyma shelamadati Torah v'nisroi mamti." So there's a Rashi in the beginning of this week's Parsha. You may have heard this Rashi before in your life, right? The most oft-quoted Rashi says, "In b'chukaisai telecho." You want to have a good life? In b'chukaisai telecho. What does b'chukaisai telecho? Does it mean shmiras hamitzvahs? Shmiras hamitzvahs. Shmiras hamitzvahs kfar amor. It says v'es mitzvosai tishmeru. Ha'mo ani mekayim in b'chukaisai telechu shetiu amelim b'tayra. And Rav Shmuel Rozovsky famously asks, okay, I understand the Mechukaisei Telechu is Torah, it's not the mitzvahs, because it already says Ves mitzvosai tishmeru. But maybe it's Limud HaTorah. How does Rashi know it's Amelus b'Torah? Where does it say anything about Amelus b'Torah? In Mechukaisei Telechu. Says Rav Shmuel Rozovsky, it says in Mechukaisei Telechu. You're walking. Where are you going? Where are you going? In Mechukaisei Telechu, if you will walk in my statutes, which is Talmud Torah, where are you going? You're going up. You're going up. You're being meroimim yourself. And there's only one way to be meroimim yourself. Talmud Torah. Amelus b'Torah. You see, we have three types of service. Hashem wants us to come close to each other. Hashem wants us to be together. Hashem wants our achdus, our friendship. So He gave us a mitzvah of gemilas chasadim. The Rebbe Hashem wants us to come close to Him. The Rebbe Hashem wants us to be mizdabek to Him. So He gave us a mitzvah of tefillah, so we could connect to Him. But then there's another zach. Hashem made you. And He gave you something. He gave you a neshama. And the neshama is very valuable. The neshama is chelak elokam mimal. The neshama is in some way a piece of the divine. The Zohar says, "Man denafach midilei nafach." Yeah, the Rebbe Hashem blew into you a piece of endless greatness, endless potential, endless possibility. What you could accomplish, who you could be, is infinite. How are you going to tap into the divine koyach that you have to bring out the infinite greatness that you have? How are you going to do it? How will you steig, become greater? How are you going to grow? Not chesed. Chesed brings you closer to another yid. Not tefillah. Tefillah brings you closer to Hashem. How will you become a more elevated person? In bechukoisai telecho, you want to walk? You want to go mechayel el chayel? That's shetiu amelim b'Torah. Says the Goyin, meikara. Meikara does not mean in the beginning. You know what beikara means? Meikara means fundamentally. Beikar. Not when you start off. In other words, what is the tachlis of Torah? What is the objective of Torah? What is the core of Torah? What is the yesod of Torah? It is a key to allow a person to grow and become greater. That's what it is, be'ikr. Avada, when you learn, you hold up the world. But that's not why Hashem gave us Talmud Torah. Avada, when you sit and learn, you hold up the world. But that's not be'ikr what you're doing. Be'ikr what you're doing is you're learning for you. It's for you. It's to be who you could be. To become who you could become. To elevate yourself. Amar Rav Yosef. Ilav hayoima. Kama Yosei Ika Beshuka, says Rashi, Ilav Hayom Shalamati Torah, Vinisroi Mamti. You want to be elevated. You want to go Mechayel Achayel. You want to become greater. You want to stay the way you were when you're born and just remain that way for your whole life. The key to answer that question is in B'chukai Telecha. So we have a mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer. It doesn't begin on day one. It begins when we have the hargasha, mashcheni acharecha narutza. It begins when we have a feeling, okay, we want to run after the Ribono Shel Olam. We want to run to Sinai. There's nothing more delicious than Talmud Torah. There's nothing better for me. It's not for anybody else. Don't think you're not doing anybody a favor in this yeshiva when you come and sit a good seder. You're not doing the Rosh Yeshiva a favor. It's not for your mother. It's not for your father. It's not for your wife. It's for you. It's the best thing you could do for you, and then everybody else is happy about it also. Especially the Rosh Yeshiva. So we'll end off, there's a guy, he was drowning in the river. He fell into a river, it was a raging river, and he doesn't know, he's trying to swim to the shore, he doesn't know how he's going to get out of the river, what's he going to do? And he's going over the rapids, and there's a tree growing out of the riverbank, and it's hanging over, and the only way this man could save his life before he goes down the falls is if he grabs a hold of that tree. Now's not a time for shtick to say, well, let me think if I could grab it with my left hand and my pinky. Let me see if how strong I am. It's not a time for shtick at that time. Let me try. I'll do my right hand, but let me see if I could chop it with one hand. How are you going to grab that tree? You're going to grab that tree with every ounce of energy you have, every fiber of your being, because that's chayim. Says Reb Chaim Volozhiner. Eitz chayim hi lemachazikim ba. This world, olam hazeh, is a raging river. The mayim hazedoinim, the challenges of olam hazeh are a raging river threatening to pull a person down. And Reb Chaim Volozhiner wrote that 250 years ago. What would he say about today? And the Ribono Shel Olam did us a favor. There's this tree that's growing over the river. And the tree, the Eitz Chaim, is Toraseinu HaKadosha. How are you going to grab a hold of that tree? Well, when I get there, when I get to the Seder, and I'll try a little bit. How are you going to grab a hold of the Eitz Chaim? It's Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba. To those who grab a hold of it, b'chol leiv u'v'chol nefesh. So as we approach the end of the Sfira, we prepare ourselves, be'ezus Hashem, to embrace the Eitz Chaim, b'chol levavenu u'v'chol nafshenu, and the Ribono Shel Olam should give us all siyata d'shmaya, to all the berachas HaTorah, Arach Yamim B'Mina, Smoil Oisher V'Chavayd. Thank the Rosh Yeshiva so much for the opportunity, and wish everybody Chag Kosher Sameach, and bracha v'hatzlacha in all of your endeavors. Thank you very much. Over here.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.